Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. On this channel and in my personal life, I discuss the topic of disaster preparation quite a bit. One of the most common questions that comes up is how to store water for your preps. I mean, let's face it, water takes up a lot of space. It's somewhat volatile in that if you store it in the wrong place and it freezes, it can rupture containers. You don't want to store it in a place that's exposed to direct sunlight. And even fresh water that's bottled up is at some point going to go bad. So in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 ways that you can store water economically. And I'm also going to talk about a couple products that you can use to kind of help along the way. So without further ado, let's get into this and see which of these techniques works the best for you. Because honestly, this topic is about individual need and the access that you have to space and materials. The first, of course, is going to be bottled water. You can go to the store and you can buy cases of bottled water that you can store, and they fit pretty well under most beds, as long as you don't have too many shoes. Ask my wife where I'm going to put this bottled water. Bottled water usually has a shelf life of 2 to 3 years before it starts to go bad, and even a little bit after that, it should be okay as long as it's been stored in ideal conditions. Probably don't want to store it in a shed in the backyard or in the garage if you hope to go back and use this anytime after its expiration date. The thing with bottled water is, of course, that you need to rotate your stock, but that's not necessarily a bad thing in a family environment. Think about how much water your family drinks on a daily basis, especially if you're one of those families that uses a lot of bottled water. Having excess bottled water stored up, stocked under a bed, all you've got to do when you need more is go pull a case out and then replace it with fresh stock. And while environmentally that may not be the best way to go, as far as storage and the ability to have access to it down the line, it's not a bad option. But you have to have the space for it. And also consider the fact that even if you double stack cases under a bed, if you've got that kind of clearance, you're only going to have about a week or two's worth of water for a family under a single bed. So you're going to have to find other spaces to put this stuff to keep it out of the way. The next method is storing water that you've purified with household methods, the most obvious being with bleach. You can take any jug and fill it up at your sink and store that water. But if you plan on using it directly, you're going to have to purify it in some way. The most common method is just using household chlorine bleach. You're going to fill up your bottle, and then before you cap it off, you're going to add about 2 drops per gallon of water, and then you're going to seal it up and put it wherever you're storing your stockpile. Now, the thing about water stored this way is you can kind of store it wherever you can find space. The big downside to it is when you go to drink it, it's going to taste like bleach. When you have to resort to using this kind of method, this is when it's going to pay to have those little sachets of water flavor packs on hand. Because trust me, the first time you have to put a glass of bleachy water in front of one of your kids, it's not going to go well. This next method is something I find particularly interesting, and that is canning water. And really, in order to do that, you only need 2 things. You need some jars and you need a stock pot. The way this is going to work is you're of course going to sanitize your jars. Run them through the dishwasher on that hot cycle and let it sanitize the jars. Then immediately take these and fill them with boiling water. You're going to leave a little bit of headspace at the top, of course. You're going to put your cap on. You're going to put your ring on finger tight. Then you're going to put it in a stock pot full of water. Just drop it in there, put all of its friends in with it, put a lid on it, and then you're going to start that up and get that water boiling. Once the pot water is boiling, you're going to let it boil for about 20 minutes. After that, you're going to remove the jars from the pot, set them on the countertop, and let them cool. During that cooling process, you should hear the pop of that cap as it sets in place. Once that's done, you know you have pure and sterile water that's going to be good for over a year. Now, outside of just having drinking water, because this is sterile, it's going to be good for medical treatments. If you have to have an emergency eye flush, or if you have to wash out a severe wound, then this is going to be your go-to because the water in there has been sterilized. You don't have to worry about boiling it and then treating it and trying to deal with that on the spot while you're trying to deal with whatever injury you or loved one has sustained. Now, one disadvantage to doing it is, of course, the space that it takes up to store all these. But most people that have done canning usually have a space set aside for the product. And one of the advantages to doing this is that if you have some stuff that you're already planning on canning, but it doesn't quite fill up the stock pot, you can put a jar of water in there with it to take up that space. It'll make the process a little more efficient, and then you'll have that extra little jar of water at the end. The other thing is, too, if you're already storing empty jars, there's no sense in just deadheading those jars. If you fill them up with water and put them back in the boxes, you have emergency water for use whenever you need it. Plus, all you've got to do when it's time to use that jar for something else is pop it open and empty it out. but it's a great way to use things that you may already have on hand. And even if you're not into canning, you can find canning products everywhere. And it's one of those investments that never really hurts to have a few things on hand for doing this kind of stuff with. Now, this next method is something that I really like because it doesn't require any extra effort on the front end. And that is storing non-potable water to be used for drinking water. But how are we going to do that? And really, to make that happen, all you need is some containers. My wife loves the product that comes in this bottle, and we were ending up throwing away a ton of these things. And then I suddenly realized these would be perfect for water storage. All it takes is me rinsing this out, filling it up with water, and then sticking it under a cabinet or in a corner of the garage or what have you. And then I've got a gallon of usable water. If I don't need it for drinking water, if I just need to flush something with it, then I can just use it straight out of the bottle. But if I do need it for drinking water, there's a process to that, but it's super easy. We're not going to cover that just yet. We're going to get to it in just a minute because I want to talk about something else that goes along with this. The same process works for our next method, and that is a water catchment system. If you're one of those people that has a rain barrel in your backyard where you collect rainwater, either to use in the garden or what have you, and keep in mind that you need to understand what your local laws are because, believe it or not, there are some places that have outlawed rain catchment. But if you have a barrel system for catching rainwater, the water that comes out of there is not immediately usable for drinking water. It's going to have to be processed in some way, whether that be boiling, purification, or filtering. So the only thing that you really need is some kind of filtration system. These things are so readily available anymore, and they have become so cheap these days that not having a water filtration system in your house is almost negligent. Look, I live in the US where we're supposed to have the best of everything, right? But all across the country, I keep seeing reports of communities that have lost access to clean water, some for obscenely long amounts of time. And even the wealthiest communities are not immune. Now, there are some things that this process will not work with, things like hazardous chemicals and fuel that gets in the water supply. But for the most part, if the water supply has simply been exposed to contaminants because of a broken line or something like that, and yet your community is telling you for the next few days you're going to have to boil water, this is the kind of system you want to have in place. Or if you're off-grid and you're living off of water that you have captured or water that's coming out of some natural water supply, this is going to be the way that you want to go. Now you can start with something like this. This is a Simpure water filter. This was the first company that ever reached out to me and said, hey, we'd like for you to do a video for us. They are not sponsoring this video, but I do have a couple of their products specifically because I like this company. I like the products they make. And I feel like if I'm going to endorse anybody for something like this, it needs to be these folks. So this particular product, you've seen this before in one of my videos. This is a water filter straw, so you can drink directly out of whatever source you have. Like I can put this on the top of one of those gallon jugs and just drink straight out of it. Or I can connect it to this 3-liter bottle and pour my water in there and then use this like a spigot to regulate the water coming out. And it's going to filter through here and I'm going to have fresh, clean water to drink. That's a more budget-friendly way to go because this is usually around $30, sometimes less depending on the sales that they run. And then you can just leave it in this storage bag and hang it wherever your water supply is so that in the event that you have to get it out and hit that water supply, you know where your filter is. Now, the other thing is something that they sent me recently that I've really been anxious to try out because these are very popular systems with people who live off grid. And of course, there is a great application for this, even if you're living in the suburbs. What they sent me recently was this Membrane Solution stainless steel gravity water filter system. This is a tank system that sits on a countertop. You simply fill it with water, and then you have a little spout here that gives you fresh, drinkable water. Let's get this thing out and check it out. So our unit is fully assembled now, and this thing is amazing. Take a look at this filter system. So this, of course, is going to go on a countertop. You have to find some place where you've got space for it. Let's start at the top and work our way down. In the top of the lid, there's a little hole right here. Now this is your vent so that when you're using it, it doesn't create a vacuum and stop working. In the upper unit, we have a triple filtration system. We have 3 filters. Clearly they're charcoal filters because I got a little on my hands from the assembly. And look at the size of these filters. The filters, of course, will sanitize the water, which then drips out through these openings inside the filter. Having these 3 filters actively working at the same time allows the flow to be at a much higher rate than most of your water filter systems. Then we have the base unit. This has a 2.5 gallon capacity to it. There's a non-slip rubber ring that keeps it comfortably sitting in this little stand that comes with the unit. That way the spigot stays up off the countertop. And of course the whole thing is made out of stainless steel, so you don't have to worry about it rusting or corroding. Now on the front, we have our spigot, and you're probably noticing that there's a wire coming out of it. And why is there an electronic connection to this spigot? It's because the last stage of the purification process is a UV filter that the water passes through before it leaves. Now, if you're off-grid, of course, you have the option of using a solar generator or something like that to plug it into. And then there's one more thing that comes in the package. In the event that you're off-grid and you don't have a solar generator or something that you can plug it into, you can also get a battery pack to go with it. This will plug in right here where the wall plug would normally go. And of course, as with most things, this has a USB connection to it. So you could plug it directly into a USB power supply or a 110 power supply, or your battery power supply. So many options. Y'all, these folks have thought of everything when it comes to this particular unit. Now, getting back on track with our topic, if we're using non-potable water, all we have to do is go get that container or go scoop out water out of our rain catchment barrel, bring it in, pour it into the top of this unit, and it's gonna filter out 2.5 gallons of water at a time. Now, I will put up here how many gallons this particular setup is capable of processing before you'll have to replace the filter. These are not a cheap option by any means. And there are a few competitors that are starting to emerge on the market right now. Feel free to shop around and find the one that works best for your budget. But also keep in mind that you need to vet those products. Don't order them off of Wish or Alibaba or something like that. Water processing filters is one thing I absolutely refuse to buy on any questionable sales site because I have no way of guaranteeing that the product is even going to work. That is not a chance that I'm willing to take just to save a buck. Pros with this unit is that it's super fast, it's capable of moving a whole lot of water, you can keep it on your counter at all times, and you can use it in day-to-day use. The cons, of course, being it's a little bit on the large side, so you have to have space for it. They're a little bit pricey, so they may not be ideal for everyone. If this isn't in your budget, then get something like this. Have a way on hand to process water for your family. Now, I think my favorite thing about this product is, though, that I can always keep water in this. How many times have you heard about a boil order in your community after a disaster after you've already been drinking water? I can't tell you how many times I have gotten up in the morning, made some coffee, had a drink of water, and then on the way to work heard on the radio that my community is now under a boil order. Having something like this on the counter that's already purifying your water all the time and then getting used to drinking out of that, that's going to save you from that grief. Now, Simpure says that this filter will clean 99.9999% of pollutants. That's a lot of pollutants. Let me throw up some statistics here that they wanted me to cover for you guys. And also, if this seems like it might be your cup of tea, they've offered me a discount that I'm going to put down in the description box below so that you can go see what the pricing is with my discount. Now, these folks have been great to work with. They have been an absolute pleasure. Every product that I've tried from them has been outstanding. This one I'm getting ready to do thorough testing on because I'm going to start using it. We're about to enter into storm seasons, and you just never know what's coming our way. The ability to store non-potable water is always going to be a great option when it comes to disaster preparedness. Not everybody has the ability to keep a bunch of fresh water around. You can have your rain catchment systems. You can have bottles of water scattered around. They have those bathtub things that you can fill full of water and keep those on hand in the event of a storm. Now, I wouldn't advise doing that during an ice storm. We get a lot of those around here, and when they do hit, sometimes we are without power for weeks. And the last thing you need is a bathtub full of water that starts freezing solid. Because what's going to happen is when it's over with, you're going to come back and your bathtub is going to crumble to pieces because that ice is going to swell inside of that container. But as far as summer storms, moderate weather storms, those things are great because no matter how long that water sits, with something like this, you'll be able to use it for drinking water. All right, so that's it for these methods of how to store water for disasters. I hope you got something out of this. Please go check out the folks at Simpure. Look at some of the products that they offer. They've got all kinds of options when it comes to water purification. This one right here, especially if you have an off-grid cabin or if you like camping in places where maybe you don't want to tote a bunch of water with you and you'd like to be able to make fresh water on site, something like this be good to have around. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. And until the next one, prepare for the world that you live in, not the one you wish existed. We'll see you around.